Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this this comforting expectation of just absolute precision.
Right, yeah, like it's binary.
Exactly. It's like engineering or something.
Yeah.
If you break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to the film and says, there it is. That is the problem.
It's a clean, closed system, very verifiable.
Broken or not broken. And, psychiatry, sure, it is a bit more fluid than orthopedics, but historically, it's still treated like a closed system. You look at one single patient's mind. You examine their childhood, their specific trauma, maybe their chemical imbalances, but it is all sealed up neatly inside their own head.
Yeah, the boundaries of the self are supposedly absolute. Like, your trauma is yours and my trauma is mine.
Right. But then you step into the psychiatric archives of Dr. Brian Weiss, and suddenly that closed system is just blown wide open.
Completely blown open.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, honestly, it's murky. It's like looking at two completely unconnected computers entirely offline that suddenly start printing out the exact same lines of impossible, highly specific code.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, and it really challenges the very foundation of what we think we know about human memory, about coincidence, and, how deep human connection actually goes.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I am your host, and today we are opening up the case files from Dr. Brian Weiss's fascinating book, Only Love is Real.
And I'll be guiding us through the clinical side of things today.
And your mission today, as you listen to this, is to explore one of the most bizarre and compelling psychiatric cases ever recorded. Let me just set the scene for you really quickly.
Yeah.
It's 1992, Miami, Florida. Two completely different people from different countries, totally different cultures, walk into the exact same psychiatric clinic on different days. They lay back in the exact same white leather recliner, and under hypnosis, they begin describing the exact same ancient memories.
It's wild.
It is wild. And I want to be entirely upfront with you all listening. I am bringing a massive, immovable wall of skepticism to this.
Which is fair.
Because, come on, two people having the same past life dream, it defies everything we know about how the brain actually works.
And, that skepticism is exactly what you should bring. It's what Dr. Weiss himself brought to his practice for years.
Right. He wasn't always into this stuff.
Not at all. As someone who has studied these specific case files very closely, I can tell you that Weiss was not some fringe practitioner. He was a highly credentialed, rigorously trained academic psychiatrist. He was a Yale Medical School graduate and the former chairman of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center down in Miami.
He's a serious guy.
Very serious. He did not start out looking for past lives. The evidence quite literally walked right into his office. So let's look at the two people at the center of this storm. First, there's Elizabeth.
Right, Elizabeth. So she is 32 years old, a beautiful, very successful accountant. She's originally from the rural Midwest, but she's now running her own firm down in Miami.
Yeah.
But her personal life is just, it's heavy. She is struggling with this profound, unresolved grief after her mother died of pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And on top of that, her romantic life is just a string of disasters. She keeps falling into these toxic relationships.
Yeah, abusive men or men where there's just zero chemistry.
Exactly, men who just refuse to commit. So she is carrying this deep, chronic ache of loneliness.
Then, on different days of the week, sitting in that exact same waiting room, we have Pedro.
Okay.
He is 29, a wealthy, handsome Mexican businessman. He comes from a very privileged, politically connected family in Mexico.
But he's got his own baggage.
Heavy baggage. Internally, he is heavily burdened by despair following his older brother's tragic death in a car crash.
Oh.
Yeah. And he's also carrying this hidden eating guilt from a secret affair in his younger days. Plus, he faces constant, sharp criticism from his mother about the women he dates.
So despite all his wealth and status, he feels incredibly alone.
Exactly.
So you have these two isolated, grieving people, and they come to Dr. Weiss for past life regression therapy.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism for a second. Because when you say hypnosis, my mind, and probably your mind too if you're listening, immediately goes to, like, stage tricks.
Oh, sure. Swinging pocket watches and people clucking like chickens.
Yeah. What does this actually involve for Elizabeth and Pedro in a real clinical setting?
Well, it is entirely far removed from a stage trick. It's a clinical tool used to access the subconscious.
Okay.
Now, in traditional therapy, Weiss might use progressive relaxation. That involves slowing the breathing, visualizing peaceful scenes, relaxing muscle groups one by one.
Like a guided meditation.
Exactly. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get someone into a trance. But think about Elizabeth. She's an accountant.
Right, her entire life is built on logic and numbers.
Precisely. Her brain is trained to be highly analytical and linear. If she sits there for 20 minutes trying to visualize a beach, her conscious mind is going to throw up massive defensive walls.
Oh, I see. She's going to overthink it.
She's going to analyze the process instead of experiencing it. She'll think, am I relaxed enough? Is this working? This is silly.
So the analytical brain essentially acts like a bouncer, keeping the therapy out.
That's a great way to put it, yes. So Weiss uses a rapid induction method. It is fascinating.
How does that work?
He has Elizabeth sit forward, lock eyes with him, and physically press her hand down as hard as she can onto his hand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's applying all this intense physical and mental pressure, and then, without any warning, he suddenly pulls his hand away.
Wait, so she physically pitches forward? She just loses her balance?
Right. Her body loses its support, and at that exact disorienting millisecond, he loudly commands, "Sleep."
Oh, wow. That is intense.
It is. Her analytical mind is entirely bypassed by the sudden physical shock. The bouncer is knocked out of the way, and the command travels straight to her subconscious.
That makes sense.
She collapses back into the chair, instantly dropping from a waking beta brainwave state into a deep, hypnotic theta state.
Okay. But here is where my skepticism really kicks into high gear.
Bring it on.
I understand altering brainwaves. But hypnosis isn't a literal time machine. It's essentially a highly suggestible, vivid dream state, right?
That is the conventional view, yes.
So if you have two grieving people who desperately want answers, isn't it highly likely they're just taking a deeply relaxed nap in that white leather recliner and generating an interactive movie?
A metaphor, essentially.
Yeah, a metaphor their brain creates to help them process their current real-world trauma.
That is the exact psychological argument Weiss initially wrestled with. Are these just elaborate metaphors?
Right.
But what separates these clinical regressions from standard dreams or metaphorical confabulations is the visceral, hyper-specific sensory detail and the physiological response in the room.
What do you mean by physiological response?
When Pedro is in a trance, he doesn't just see a movie of himself dying of a malarial fever centuries ago. His body reacts in real time.
Like he gets a fever.
He begins to sweat so profusely that he completely drenches his shirt in the air-conditioned office. His heart rate spikes.
So the body literally believes it's actually happening in the present tense.
Yes. And Elizabeth, in her sessions, she feels the biting cold of the wind on her hands, the rough, scratchy texture of ancient clothing.
Wow.
They recall specific smells of the air, the exact architectural layout of buildings that no longer exist, the searing emotional agony of physical pain. It is fully physically embodied.
Okay, but even if I can see that they are experiencing intense, embodied sensory hallucinations, I have to emphasize to you, the listener, how utterly bizarre the setup of this case is.
It's totally improbable.
You have the Midwestern accountant and the Mexican businessman. They do not know each other. They move in completely different social circles. They have zero shared contacts. They're sitting in the same room on entirely different days. And then the cross matches start piling up in Weiss's notes.
This is where the files shift from medically interesting to genuinely astonishing.
Okay, tell me about the cross matches.
Let's look at the Palestine timeline. Elizabeth goes into a trance and remembers being a young girl named Miriam in ancient Palestine, living somewhere near Jerusalem.
Okay.
Her father is a potter.
And the death scene she describes for her father is just brutal, right?
Horrific. She recounts how Roman soldiers, essentially just for cruel sport, tie her father by the ankles and drag him behind a horse through the dirt roads.
Oh, God.
His head repeatedly strikes the rocks. She remembers running to him after they leave. She cradles his bleeding, shattered head in her lap, right there in the dust.
That is so heavy.
She describes the physical sensation of rocking back and forth, crying, and she whispers, "I love you, Father. I will always love you."
Heart-wrenching stuff.
Yeah.
But isolated, it's just one patient's vivid regression.
True.
But then on a completely different day, Pedro is in the chair.
Yes. Pedro goes under. He remembers being an older man in ancient Palestine.
Okay.
He describes the agonizing physical sensation of being brutally dragged by Roman soldiers. He feels his ribs shattering, the metallic taste of blood filling his mouth.
Oh, wow.
And as he's lying, dying in the dirt, he feels his daughter cradling his head in her lap. He literally feels her rocking him back and forth. He hears her crying over him.
And the detail that really locks it in is the name, isn't it?
Right. Pedro struggles at first to remember his identity in that life. Weiss, looking at his notes and feeling a hunch, intuitively prompts him with a name he heard from Elizabeth weeks earlier.
Eli.
Yes, Eli. And Pedro immediately responds, his voice totally changing, "That is my name. Some call me Elihu and some call me Eli."
Okay, stop right there, because I can hear the rational part of my brain screaming right now. Cryptomnesia.
Ah, the sponge theory.
Yes, the human brain is a giant sponge. It absorbs everything we see, read, or hear, and often completely forgets the source. It is incredibly common for people to recall a forgotten piece of information and genuinely believe it is an original thought or memory.
Right, like accidental plagiarism.
Exactly. They are living in Miami in 1992. They could have easily both watched the same Charlton Heston biblical epic on cable television on a Sunday afternoon.
Sure.
They could have read the same historical fiction novel at the airport.
That is the textbook definition of cryptomnesia, and it is the absolute first place any rigorous psychiatrist would go.
Right.
But the evidence in Weiss's files pushes back against that theory aggressively. It isn't just that they share general historical tropes like, oh, Romans were mean.
Okay, what makes it different?
It's the impossible specificity. It is the exact name, Eli. It is the synchronized physical memory of the daughter rocking the father's shattered body in the dust. You do not get synchronized, multi-sensory, matching physical trauma responses from vaguely remembering a cable movie. And it happens across multiple distinct timelines.
Right, because if it was just one timeline, you could write it off as a statistical anomaly, just a weird coincidence. But then there are the Mongolian plains.
Exactly. Pedro regresses to a lifetime as a nomadic warrior in a sweeping land he identifies as Mongolia.
Okay.
He remembers riding back to his village after it has been raided by an enemy from the east. It is a complete massacre. His parents are dead. His baby is dead.
Oh, my God.
His wife is gone, presumed kidnapped or dead. The village is burned to the ground. But amidst the ashes, he notes one incredibly specific, anomalous detail.
What was it?
There is a single intact tent remaining on the edge of the carnage, and it is heavily decorated with large white feathers.
So if cryptomnesia doesn't explain it, my next skeptical counter is false memory syndrome, combined with the brain's deep need for narrative.
Okay, let's hear it.
The human brain is a meaning-making machine. These are two people experiencing senseless, chaotic grief in their present lives.
Right, Elizabeth with her mother, Pedro with his brother.
Exactly. Maybe their subconscious minds are just independently inventing a dramatic past life trauma to give their current pain a narrative structure. It probably feels better to be a tragic Mongolian warrior than just a lonely guy in Miami.
It is a brilliant psychological theory. The brain definitely craves narrative to process grief. But again, that theory falls apart against the cross-match details.
How so?
Because Elizabeth, in her own completely independent session, remembers living on those exact same sweeping plains. She remembers the exact same violent raid. But she experiences the entire narrative from the perspective of the victim. She sees the slaughter. She isn't killed, though.
She gets taken, right?
Yes, she is captured by the enemy warriors and taken away forever, forced to become the captor's wife. She describes how her spirit completely withers away.
God, that's dark.
And she, without any prompting at all, specifically describes the large tent with the white feathers where her mother-in-law was killed.
The exact same tent.
The exact same tent. These are deeply verified cross-match details happening in a pre-internet 1992 psychiatric office. There is no search engine for them to accidentally coordinate this imagery.
Okay, so if I am Dr. Weiss, I am sitting there listening to these cassette tapes, cross-referencing my yellow legal pads, and the realization hits. These two patients, who are both desperately lonely, who are both grieving, you're paying me to help fix their broken hearts, are soulmates.
Yes.
They're the father and daughter from Palestine. They're the Mongolian husband and the captured wife. And they're literally passing each other like ships in the night in my waiting room.
Yeah.
He has to intervene, right? He has to say something.
Which brings us to the massive ethical crisis. And there is a ticking clock.
Because Pedro's therapy is wrapping up.
Exactly. Pedro is finally resolving his crippling grief over his brother. He is preparing to move back to Mexico permanently to take over his family's business. He is weeks away from leaving the country forever.
So Weiss is staring down the barrel of a professional nightmare. I'm looking at this from a liability standpoint.
Right.
He is bound by the strictest codes of medical board ethics and patient confidentiality. The foundational rule is do no harm.
Always.
He cannot legally or ethically say, hey, Pedro, your eternal soulmate is my 3 p.m. appointment on Thursdays. If he does that, he risks his medical license.
He could lose everything.
But what if he tells them and it completely derails their current psychological progress. What if they meet and they actually hate each other in this life, and they blame the doctor for ruining their recovery?
That is the agonizing dilemma. If he stays silent, he maintains his pristine medical ethics, but he might doom two souls to entire lifetimes of continued loneliness.
That's a heavy burden.
Very heavy. He is feeling the immense, crushing pull of what he describes as a cosmic obligation. He has inadvertently become a gatekeeper of destiny.
So it's basically the rules of the Miami Medical Board versus the rules of the universe.
Exactly. And to understand why Weiss took this cosmic obligation so seriously, we have to look at how past life regression fundamentally changes a person's relationship with grief.
Okay.
Weiss had seen this cognitive shift happen before, most notably in a parallel case involving the legendary comedian Joan Rivers.
Look, Joan Rivers was a comedy icon, but she practically lived for showbiz and drama. If we're talking about rigorous psychiatric evidence, a celebrity is not exactly a reliable, objective witness.
I completely understand why you would flag that. It's a fair point. But her experience perfectly illustrates the profound psychological mechanism at play here, what Weiss calls the knowing of the heart.
The knowing of the heart.
Yeah. When Rivers came to Weiss, she was drowning in grief over the deaths of her mother and her husband. It was destroying her. Under hypnosis, she completely dropped the defensive showbiz persona. She recalled being an Englishwoman in 1835.
Oh.
She saw herself walking in a park, married to a man in a beaver top hat, and she had a 6-year-old daughter who was dying.
And the cognitive shift happens there.
Yes. While in the trance, Rivers instantly recognized that dying 6-year-old girl in 1835 as her own mother in her current life.
Wait, really? How did she know?
Weiss asked her that exact question. How do you know? Rivers just sobbed and said, I just know it's her. It was a soul recognition.
So why does that heal her real-world grief, though?
Because it reframes the entire timeline of the soul. When someone experiences that kind of regression, they stop viewing death as a finite, absolute end.
Oh, I see.
If you realize you have lived before and you have loved the same souls across centuries, then the current death of a loved one is no longer a permanent separation. It is just a temporary pause.
That's beautiful, actually.
It is. That realization completely neurologically rewired Rivers' grief. Weiss knew Elizabeth and Pedro possessed that exact same potential for profound, timeline-altering healing.
So Weiss decides he has to engineer a meeting without actually breaking confidentiality. He tries to play the universe's subtle matchmaker.
He does. He shifts their schedule so their appointments are back-to-back. He figures if they just cross paths in the waiting room, destiny will naturally take over.
But it completely backfires. It fails twice.
Yeah, he really does.
The first time, they lock eyes. Pedro notices her. Elizabeth notices him. There is a spark. But then Elizabeth's analytical accountant brain overrides her intuition.
She talks herself out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She tells herself to behave appropriately in a doctor's office, and she just walks out. The second time, 2 weeks later, the exact same thing happens. A smile, a lingering look, and she leaves. Pedro finishes the therapy. He is packing his bags for Mexico. Weiss's intervention was a total failure.
It really seems like it, but
Yeah.
This is where we get to the mechanics of destiny. Because Weiss backs off, bound by his ethics, but the universe apparently does not.
Okay, so Pedro travels to Boston for a final business trip before moving back to Mexico.
Right.
And Elizabeth is entirely separately scheduled to fly to Boston to visit a friend. But they are supposed to be on completely different flights, leaving at different times.
But then Elizabeth arrives at the airport in Miami, and her direct flight to Boston is canceled.
Mechanical issues, right?
Yes. She is frustrated. Her schedule's ruined. The airline reroutes her onto a different flight to Newark, where she has to catch a connecting shuttle.
Okay.
That random rerouting puts her on the exact same flight as Pedro.
The statistical improbability of that is staggering.
It plays out incredibly cinematically. Pedro is already sitting at the gate lounge. Elizabeth walks up to the counter. Pedro catches her out of the corner of his eye, and he recognizes her from the psychiatric waiting room.
Wow.
But it's deeper than just recognizing a face. He feels an overwhelming magnetic familiarity. He physically cannot take his eyes off her.
And Elizabeth, who has been suppressing her intuition for years just to survive her toxic relationships, feels him watching her. She tries to read a book, but her heart is racing. Her psychic antennae are on maximum alert. She intuitively knows the stranger is safe.
Pedro finally approaches her. The attraction is immediate. Within minutes of talking, he suggests they ask the gate agent to change their seats so they can sit together on the plane.
So they are in the air, flying over Orlando at night. And they hit severe thunderstorms. violent turbulence.
It gets really rough.
Elizabeth is terrified. And if I am mapping out human psychology here, in a state of high adrenaline and panic, a sudden physical touch is going to trigger something massive. He reaches for her, doesn't he?
Instinctively. Without even thinking, Pedro reaches out and grabs her hand to comfort her. And in that single physical touch, the electricity of centuries connects them.
Oh, wow.
It's an instant soul-deep jolt. Elizabeth feels the weight of lifetimes of connection in his hand. Pedro looks into her eyes, those specific blue eyes with hazel specks he remembered from his regression, and the connection they missed in the waiting room finally, permanently locks into place at 30,000 feet.
I had to pause and look at the meta-narrative here for a second. Dr. Weiss had already nearly ruined his pristine academic career at Mount Sinai when he published his first book on reincarnation, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Oh, absolutely.
The medical establishment mocked him. Why risk his reputation all over again to publish this specific love story? Why put himself back in the crosshairs of his peers?
Because for Dr. Weiss, the truth of what he witnessed was more important than his academic standing. He saw the profound physical relief his patients experienced when they uncovered these connections.
He couldn't unsee it.
Exactly. And then witnessing destiny literally unfold on that airplane, seeing two people conquer centuries of grief and a canceled flight to find each other, it proved to him that human connection is the ultimate healing mechanism. He couldn't ethically keep it a secret.
So what does this all mean? Not just for Elizabeth and Pedro, but for you listening to this right now.
It asks you to reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever felt an inexplicable familiarity with a total stranger? Have you ever locked eyes with someone and felt a foundational trust that usually takes years to build? Or conversely, have you ever carried a heavy grief, a fear, or an anxiety that feels fundamentally older than your current life?
It's a really heavy question. And look, I promised you listening that I would remain the skeptic, and I am holding my ground. I am still wrestling with the literal reality of past lives.
As you should.
I still lean toward the idea that the brain is a masterful storyteller. But here's the thing. Even if you look at this purely as a psychological metaphor, the lesson from Elizabeth and Pedro is absolutely undeniable.
Completely.
Holding on to anger, isolating ourselves, walling ourselves off behind analytical defenses, it poisons us in the present moment.
Yeah.
Choosing to connect, choosing to be vulnerable, choosing love is the only mechanism that actually heals our nervous systems.
And that aligns perfectly with Weiss's ultimate conclusion from these cases. He posits that love isn't just a fleeting biological chemical reaction designed for reproduction. It is a literal energy. It is the strongest force in the world, a force capable of surviving the death of the physical body and crossing centuries to find its target.
Wow.
His ultimate thesis, drawn from thousands of hours of these regressions, is simple. Only love is real. Everything else is an illusion.
It is a framework that makes you rethink everything about the people you interact with daily. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mysteries of the human heart and the incredibly strange, undeniably powerful archives of Dr. Brian Weiss.
It is definitely a perspective that shifts how you view the trajectory of your own life.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If Dr. Weiss is right, and souls really do travel through time in clusters, taking turns, playing parents, children, enemies, and lovers, take a look at the people closest to you right now. Who's to say the stranger who bumped your shoulder in the coffee shop this morning wasn't your greatest love 1,000 years ago? And more importantly, if we really do have all of eternity to get it right with each other, why are we in such a rush to be angry today?
It certainly changes the stakes of every passing interaction.
It really does. Because maybe the mind isn't a closed system after all. Maybe those two unconnected computers printing the exact same code aren't broken. Maybe they're just finally communicating on a network we're only just beginning to understand.